Hello everyone, this is Tom Poole and Robert Christiansen from Cloud Nation, and we thank you very much for joining us today. We've been doing a weekly webinar series talking about the cloud, talking about how it affects our current and future clients. And one of the things that we've continually heard feedback from is really what our listeners want to hear more about was exactly how does the total cost of ownership work? And that's one of those conversations that can either be a real value add or it can be one of those things that you really don't want to have if you don't completely understand it. So one of the things that we thought we would do today is after, whatever, we've probably been 8 or 9 months talking to technology providers, to MSPs and to SMBs about everything related to the cloud, but at the end of the day, a lot of it comes down to economics and how does it really work. So what we thought we would do today is do our webinar on TCO, total cost of ownership, cloud versus on-premises, and see if we can give you at least our best kind of shot looking at it objectively, how the economics work. So with that said, let's move forward. I guess before we move forward too quick, I just want to make the introduction. My name is Tom Poole. I'm the president of Cloud Nation, and joining me on the phone is Robert Christiansen, who's our chief technical officer. And when it comes to technology in the cloud, there's just no one better than Robert. So I'm just pleased as punch to have him on the webinar today. And Robert, say hello.
Thank you, Tom. I'm glad to be here.
Okay. So today's objectives is what we want to do is, speaking of objectives, we want to look objectively at the total cost of ownership and from a traditional IT standpoint and also from a cloud-based offering. We want to spend a little bit of time understanding the mindset of the typical SMB when they're evaluating the total cost of ownership. And then, again, based on all the discussions that we've had over the last year with SMBs, MSPs, and ISVs, share some best practices we've seen. The next thing is we'd like to provide some real-time examples of spreadsheets and tools. And then the final thing we want to do is we want to give you a look at what we call our TCO DIALATRON. And it's a real-time assessment tool that Robert's just done a wonderful job on. And what we'd like to be able to do is to not only to introduce you to it, but also when we do, for those of our listeners today, what we'd like to be able to do is to embed that in a PDF file and be able to send it to you so that you can use it yourself. And one of the things along with that we would like to ask is if we are going to send it out, that feedback is the breakfast of champions, and if there's things we can do to make that Dialatron better, we'd sure like your feedback. So before we get started from a housekeeping standpoint, a couple things to keep in mind. Number one is please feel comfortable asking questions. That's why we're here. At the end of our webinar today, we've reserved some time for Q&A. However, if you have a question that needs to be answered, please go ahead and ask it. There's a little IM instant messenger function within the our webinar technology here. Just go ahead and ask it, and Heather, who has joined to help us out, will go ahead and ask me the question, and we'll stop what we're doing and answer it to the extent that we can. And the last thing is enjoy. This is actually a pretty power-packed webinar. So before we jump into the actual TCO with traditional IT and the cloud, I thought I would talk about a few things here. Is that number one, in the 80s, a pretty prominent analyst firm came out with a big splash by saying that the cost of computing or to operate a computer was actually about $10,000 per year. And that caught everybody by surprise, and especially since about 20% of that cost was actually the price of the hardware and the software, and the rest of it was all the other stuff that goes along with making sure that that works and the servers that support it. And so kind of where I'm going with that is that the key, if you will, in the total cost of ownership is there for a reason. Simply looking at the desktop has very little relevance to the total cost of operating that. TCO challenges. I think for all of us on the webinar today, we can probably all agree that TCO has a number of real basic weaknesses. I guess the way we look at it is say, even with those weaknesses or shortcoming, it beats kind of the head in the sand alternative. Really, some of the weaknesses are, I guess, is number one is there's no real standards. Generally, you're kind of on your own. You have to make your own assessment and approach your TCO your own way. If you are to include the T, you must cast a fairly wide net of items to include. And, really when it comes to including those items is, it's often helpful to start with a little bit of a list. And so what we've done here is let's first take a look at the total cost of ownership, and this is from IDC, and then we'll take a look at some of the items that are involved in your list of total cost of ownership. And I thought a couple interesting data points here was that if you take a look at this pie chart here, this is 100% of the cost of operating a server. And what we see is about 60% of that cost is maintenance and staff costs. About 15% is the downtime and loss of staff productivity. About 14% is actually the server software and the server hardware. So if you take a look at it, you've literally got 86% of the cost of running that server doesn't include the hardware of this or the software. And downtime and maintenance, again, represent about 75% of it. So again, if we approach things and just say from a TCO standpoint, what's really involved in this is what we'll see is that the hardware and the software typically represent a pretty small percentage. Server TCO. So maybe Robert, you can take a stab at this slide and share with our listeners today some of the things that you've seen over the years as a CTO that people really need to keep in mind when they're looking at server TCO.
Yeah, Tom. The first ones on the list there, 1 through 5, 6, are kind of table stakes when you're doing your TCO, and most of the folks on this phone call here, the webinar that we're having, is going to immediately go to those things that are the actual cash things that I have to write out. You got to go to the CFO and say, hey, here's the check you got to write. And then you start dropping into things that are a little bit more that you just may not think about, like like number 9, there is infrastructure, tables, racks, and stuff like that. And if you racked anything up, it's not a cheap endeavor. You got to bring somebody in, you got to wire it. If you keep going down, like for security, do you have to put in a special door onto your little server room that you're maintaining? Because we did one for a place that had 35 people in one place, and they wanted it locked, so they had to have a security door on it, and had a key pass code and that type of thing. And you start going down this list here, and you start saying, hey, wait a second, if I'm in the state of California, there's end-of-life disposal costs. We actually have to call somebody up to come and get the hardware and destroy it, and then we have to pay a fee for ecology, And I think number 17 is really interesting one. Executive time spent on managing technology, and there is a lot of value in just presenting that to your clients. If you're an MSP like that, talking about you need to run your business, you don't need to run technology. So there's real cost involved with that when you're talking about it. But I think this is a pretty inclusive list. We actually pared this down from almost 30 because the other ones were a little esoteric, but I think this is a heck of a good list for any MSP or reseller out there to bring to the table and say, hey, these are things you need to consider.
Thanks, Robert. So what to include, and what we say here is on the previous page, we have what seemed like everything included, but we really didn't. We started, to Robert's point, with a list that was about 30 different items, and it includes things like insurance, how much floor space within the building, and auditing cost, disaster recovery planning, things like this. And we didn't include those just because we didn't feel it was necessary to have everything there, but to start with a relatively comprehensive list certainly makes sense. And then the last bullet point here, it's really up to you to include what you think is relevant with your assessment of TCO. And really what your goal is to make it realistic and meaningful to your client so that they can look at it and it doesn't look like a laundry list of things that don't really make sense, but the things that are on your list when you do your TCO assessment, again, are realistic and meaningful. This slide we see a notebook. And what I say up here is TCO, where not to start. And why do I say let's not start there? Let's go to the next slide. And just say most SMBs will immediately isolate the cost of the hardware and software and assume that is their expense. You know, the laptop was this much, the software was this much, and therefore, let's say we have a refresh cycle of 3 years, we divide it by 3 type deal. As we saw from the IDC study, 84% of the annual cost for the servers, this is the servers here, but had absolutely nothing to do with hardware and software. And while it's not a linear transition, realistically a percentage of server expense should be loaded on each desktop to provide a true picture of its expense. So what we're going to do here is we take a look at kind of, this is what I call SMB IT math. And basically what it is, again, we have a notebook, and let's just say arbitrarily that the notebook was $900. Kind of blurred out the software, but we kind of know the software suite, and let's just say that was $500. And then we've got the price, which equals 9 and 5 is 14. So if we divide it by 3, or we have a refresh cycle of once every 3 years, what that would tell us is that our desktop cost is $466.67. And I think all of us on the phone today, on the webinar today, know that that really isn't the total cost. But how do we get to that total cost? How do we justify it? Well, this brings us to the DIALATRON. And this is just a screenshot right here. But just in a moment, we're going to go in, and Robert, who is the author of this, and just did a great job of really making it so that we have a dynamic model. Again, we're happy to send it to you so you can use it when you're doing your own analysis. But this is a wonderful dynamic model to quickly determine what your cost is, whether it be an on-premises or a cloud nation or a cloud model. So what we're going to do here is we're going to bounce out of the PowerPoint, and we're going to actually go into this DIALATRON, and we're going to let Robert take over to explain what he put together.
Thanks, Tom.
Yeah.
There we go.
Okay, Robert, can you take control of the screen there?
You got to give that, I'm going to request the guy here. Request keyboard and mouse. There we go.
Give control. There we go. Okay, Robert, it's all yours.
Okay, great. So, folks, what we tried to do here was give you some kind of feedback around identifying and managing a scenario where you're working with your particular customers. So what we have initially set up here is a client that has 25 desktops, and that's listed up here at the top. We have storage. They've got a very small amount right here in gigabytes, 200 gig, and they got 1 server. So that 1 server might be running SBS. It might also include maybe a small SQL server on it, or you may have some line of business applications that are very important to them, like a legal application or whatever. Excuse me. And then what we did here is in the capital cost, and this is $700 for a PC. Now, you know as well as I do that they can be much higher, or it depends on the where you buy them at Costco or whatever. And then here's the server price here of $3,500, and that is another thing. And what we've done in the capital cost here is that these are the depreciated items, and we've depreciated these things over a 3-year period. So whenever you're talking with financially with a business, they're going to say, hey, if I got to lay out cash and it's an asset, I typically depreciate that monthly over a 36-month period or 3 years. So for the purposes of this modeling here, all of your server costs are lumped into one dial here. So let's say you have to have a Windows R2 server there, and that also includes some other additional license and stuff. You should lump all that into this price here. And then over here, this is the on-premise cost. So there's server support monthly. This would be your fee that you're charging currently right now. Let's say it's $750 a month to manage that server and to be there and to babysit it or whatever it is that you're doing. The next one below that is the monthly server backup cost. So, okay, so let's say you have some service where you're replicating, or more likely you have the accounting person swapping out tapes every other day or something like that and hauling them home. And so that would be like the aggregated cost of the tapes. You know, you got to have 10 of them, and you got to replace them, you know, however you choose to do it. But we did a starting off number of $50 a month. And then the desktop support, you may be charging some number per desktop per month to provide that support, or it may translate into that a number every month of how much on-site time you're doing. So all of these dials are changeable for you. And then we added in some very minor, you know, virus and backup protection per desktop per year, because you know the subscriptions are basically yearly that you subscribe for each desktop, and however you choose to do it. And all of these can go to 0 if you like. So what we've done now is that you can go in here and change these actual cost numbers by just simply clicking on and dragging it. So this is $3,500. Let's say that your actual server costs were actually $5,000 and right around there, okay? And you can see the on-premise yearly cost is right here, it's listed. So, and that would be a per desktop cost. This is the Cloud Nation yearly cost and the difference between the two. So let's say that we go and we grab this guy and we say we had 30 desktops. And you can start seeing the little dials change down below as you start moving them around, and you can set this to the number that you actually want. So let's like drop it down to 20 or something like that. There's 20. And we can see the differences between the two, and then I can say, oh, 200 gig, I'm not really dealing with that. I'm dealing with more like about 500 gig of storage, so I can get it close enough there. And one of the feedbacks I'm always going to get is make it round to the nearest like 10 or 20 or so. And then over here on the must-have support, so let's say that the support you're really charging them is like more like $1,500 a month. And you can start seeing that the things that really impact the cost per month is, you know, the support structure for an on-site support. And then let's say your backup costs are a little bit higher, and that might be, let's say you're using some kind of BDR, $100 a month to do that amount, and that's tied to this number here, the amount of gigabytes of storage. In addition, you know, desktop support may not be 50, it may be like 25 or $30 a month. And as you can see what we're doing here, okay? And what that does is it sets the model up here of the capital expense that you're doing and you're depreciating versus the on-premise cost that you're charging might be for various types of services. You may have a little piece of the cloud already, so you could easily lump in a BDR in this backup piece right here, for example. And then down below, you have what are called Cloud Nation pieces. So now, this is the part where we'll help you and give you a little feedback of how this goes. But in essence, we tried to give you the 5 basic pieces that are important to a Cloud Nation solution or a delivery of any kind of total, you know, services delivered from the cloud. So we have something here called a cloud PC cost. So what that means is you can have a thin client or a low-end PC that doesn't need to be a $700 one. It can be a Costco $300 or $350 one. You can order a Dell Omniplex for like $310 now, I think is what the number is. But most time they just re-provision the existing stuff, so you can literally drop this down to pretty much $1, okay? And so if you're going to re-provision, but if you're going to actually go out and buy new ones to help them refresh, something like that, you can load that in. And then there's what's called the public cloud VM, virtual machine. So you're going to be taking this server here that you have, and part of our moving to the cloud process is to move that on-premise server to some kind of cloud public hosting, and then using our multi-tenancy environment, you'll be connecting that into it. So here's how much those prices are, and you can go right to anybody like Rackspace or Amazon and stuff and get the quote right there of how much that's going to cost. So let's say that's $250. Let's say you have to get a little bit more space on it, so you may have to make that $300. And then you can say, hey, how much is my cloud storage there? So I can take that 500 gig, and then how much will it be up in the cloud? So let's say instead of it's a 10 cents a gig, it's now 26 cents a gig. Now, here's something that's always important, is that because you're dealing with cloud connection to the local on-premise stuff, you may have to bump up the internet on-site. You may have to get a bigger pipe. You may have to add additional space to it. So let's say we have to do $128 a month more. And now here's the part that really is useful, is that because it's a VM in the cloud, your support amount, although will be less than up here, you actually spend less time doing it because hopefully it's more stable, right? So you can start adding that to this, and you can start seeing how that impacts the yearly desktop savings and stuff. So let's move that to 250. So for a 20-person desktop, going from on-premise to the cloud, you can confidently say, hey, I'm going to save you $5,300 for the year and $26,000 over the lifetime of that. Now, we've been grossly adding some actual pieces here, but this particular one, if we were actually bring this down, you can start seeing that the cost savings gets better. You can start saying, hey, I'm not going to buy PCs. I'm going to drop that down. That's what it does to it as well. And now you can start realistically putting together real-life scenarios right in front of your customer and start getting an idea of how moving from a capital expense on-premise solution to the cloud solution works. So, Tom, I think that one of the key things we want to drive home here is that we don't know everything about this. We don't know all the moving parts or what we should include here. You know, we were looking for the feedback from the group out there to really kind of take this tool. We can send it to you via email. You can run it as long as you got a flash player. You can run it. And then you can say, hey, does this really work for me in my situation? Or hey, you guys need to add this or change that, and I think it'd be better for everybody. So that's the tool.
No, thanks, Robert. Well, great job putting this together. And we've used kind of dynamic modeling like this before. And when I came to Robert and I said, hey, Robert, is there a way that you can put something together that would make it easy for our listeners, for MSPs, to actually take this model and be able to, by themselves, slide the dials back and forth and figure out really what the on-premises yearly cost is and what the Cloud Nation yearly cost is, and be able to do a what-if scenario right with their clients. Robert was kind enough to put this together. So again, kind of bouncing back into our scenario, this is something, this dynamic dashboard that Robert put together. What we can do is we can embed this in a PDF file, and for any of our listeners today, we'd be happy to send that to you. Go back into slideshow mode here. What we say in this slide here is if you're interested in having your own working copy of this, what we call the DIALATRON, for lack of a better thing to call it, is just simply send an email to Robert. He's robert@cloudnation.co. The only thing we ask in return is for your feedback, is let us know what we should change, what we should add. Again, feedback is the breakfast of champions, and we just want to make sure that at the end of the day that this DIALATRON becomes something that you can use and use every single day. So any questions, by the way, lob them into to Heather, and she'll make sure and stop what we're doing and ask. The other thing we wanted to talk a little bit about was what we call off-balance sheet value of a virtual desktop. And I think we'll just kind of go through these if that works for you, and just say that these are some of the things that we're seeing and hearing back from the MSPs and the CSPs that we're working with, cloud services providers, is that when it comes to things that really don't come up and you can't put into that DIALATRON but have value, is when it comes to providing a virtual desktop, is that you've got mobility with a Cloud Nation virtual desktop. Literally, we can deliver the same experience on any device anywhere. With a traditional desktop, that's just not possible. Backups, typically on any device, if you will, it's not comprehensive, where with the virtual desktop it is. Security, we provide full 256 SSL. One of the big ones here is that with this whole movement toward BYOD, and you know, you've got employees that are bringing in their tablets and their smartphones and their own laptops, and they want to use it all. The thing with a virtual desktop is that the company data actually never lands on that device. It always lives in the data center, and an image of that goes on to that device. So your company data with a traditional desktop can be at risk, whereas With a Cloud Nation virtual desktop, it isn't. You can actually set it so that you can't print off that device, you can't use a USB or a thumb drive off that device, so you can really control the level of security. Downtime, real issue, no issue, productivity. What is, we see, we have a 99.9% SLA, and we beat that handily every single month. Scalability, significant capital to scale with a traditional desktop, provision at will, and then the lock-in is typically when you buy a piece of hardware or software, you pretty much locked in for 3 years. And with what we've got with the Cloud Nation desktop, it's a month-to-month scenario, no long-term contracts. The next thing, if you're doing a TCO conversation with your client, and again, we're hoping that this PowerPoint helps you to understand how to have that conversation. But if you're having that conversation, a couple things that we've seen is that a great time to have that conversation is when your client or prospect is at the end of their refresh cycle, when they're staring at a big capital expenditure in the face, and they're wondering about the future of their company. And this is also compounded when you've got a client that's at the end of their refresh cycle and currently using Microsoft Small Business Server, which is, as we all know, end of life. A couple other things that we've seen is, in many cases, we're seeing new companies, what we call born in the cloud companies, that are launching today, and they just have no desire to have a 42U rack and full of servers and SANs and everything else that goes along with that. Another thing that makes having a conversation about a virtual desktop really an interesting one is that with with organizations that have a distributed workforce. I'm going to transition a little bit here and maybe let Robert take over this, because whether it be Cloud Nation, quite frankly, or another provider, I think what we're seeing is the MSPs that we're working with are they're looking at what their options are, and again, just as we're trying to very objectively look at the TCO between a traditional desktop and a cloud offering, if you will, we want to also be open and receptive and say, we want listeners that are on the webinar today to really take a look at us as an alternative, but we realize we're not the only alternative out there. And so maybe, Robert, you can explain basically what we're seeing in the marketplace as it relates to options for resellers that want to embrace the cloud.
Yeah, Tom. The key here is that you have, as an MSP reseller, you have options out there. You can go to infrastructure and build your own. You may already have servers hosted in a co-location facility, or you may have your own racks that you're renting out to various folks, and full as well as I do the capital expenditure that you need to maintain, that you need to put out, and then what's called density to make that capital expenditure worthwhile investment for you as an individual company. And that's a tough game. There are really big providers out there who are doing and buy at very large volumes that are very hard to compete at. And so you can do your own hardware, co-location, networking, put together a multi-tenancy environment, because if you have any background like I have when it comes to managing multiple Active Directory structures, it just becomes rapidly complex, and you get somebody trained and knowing what all the pieces are, and then they go off and move to somebody else, and with them goes that knowledge. So it's really difficult to put that together from the ground up. You can go rent excuse me, virtual machines and build them in build your own private cloud. So you're kind of offloading a lot of that work onto the infrastructure into the private cloud environment. You have to rent a lot of them. And the typical environment that we have typically runs approximately 150 to 160 different VMs that make up that architecture, and so you have a significant cash burn that happens as a result of that. And then what you find is that when you pull that kind of stuff together, they all have to reside in a lot of the same racks to get the performance that you're looking for, and that requires you to have a conversation with somebody like Rackspace or Amazon, and that kind of breaks their model, and then you're over into the rental world with them. You can piece together a cloud applications and solutions. This is an avenue that a lot of folks tend to take because it's easier. It's less has less friction. So you can go get Office 365 from obviously Microsoft. You can get intermedia for your hosted exchange. You can bring down a BDR solution. You can pull down a Salesforce or some kind of SaaS-based CRM piece. You can get an ERP system and kind of piece this whole thing together. But you can do that for one client, 2 clients, 3 clients, but then when you start doing that on a regular basis and then trying to figure out the billing and making sure you pull that all together in a way that satisfies the customer, and more importantly, the challenge is that you have to move them from their on-premise into the cloud, and a lot of the applications they may have are going to be Windows applications that may not have made their way to the cloud. So you're faced with a lot of obstacles there. Or you can engage Cloud Nation and the architecture we have, which takes every Windows application, whether legacy or not, and moves them into a cloud-based architecture with our proven Citrix Microsoft stack of multi-tenancy delivery across public cloud providers. So you can go to an Amazon or a Rackspace or a Savvis and say, hey, I need 2 VMs to satisfy this customer's actual app delivery, and then you can plug that into our architecture, and off you go.
Thanks, Robert. Appreciate it. So this slide here, really, is this what IT has become? And we see a pretty fancy little red sports car here. But one of the things that I think that we're all seeing in the marketplace is that the role of IT is changing. What used to be more of an internally focused endeavor has become much more of what I'll call the supply chain manager. And the analogy that I'm using here is that we just saw a fancy red sports car, and then here you're looking at an image of all the pieces and parts that go into this. And this is very similar to what it is right now with a cloud, is that some of the things that you're working with may be an on-premises solution. Some of the things you're working with will be necessarily third-party apps that you're bringing in. And what we need to do as providers is just keep in mind that at the end of the day, our clients and our prospects really don't want to worry about where all these things are coming from. In terms of a car and thinking about it with a consumer, the consumer doesn't care where the seat came from, or the steering wheel, or the radiator, or the battery. They don't care where those things came from. What they care is that when they jump in the car, turn on the key, put it in drive, that they can go. That's really it. And when it comes to us as service providers, that's what Cloud Nation is really working on, making sure to provide our MSPs that are transitioning and adding a CSP or a cloud services practice to what they're doing, give them the ability to go in and actually offer that turnkey package. Doing so will position you as an individual that is not only embracing what your clients have in their on-premise current environment, but also saying, you know what, we're open and receptive, and we have other solutions we can offer. And you know what I say to MSPs when they call us up and they ask us, well, what about the cloud? I'm nervous about it. I don't know if I like the cloud. I don't know if I'm comfortable talking with our clients about the cloud. Here's kind of what I typically say is, you know, the cloud is not everything. And even though we're called Cloud Nation, we realize that. But one of the things we also realize is that as an MSP or a transitioning CSP is that if you're not talking to your clients about the cloud, then somebody else is. And what we want to make sure is we offer you the tools to not only maintain your existing business, but quite frankly, use it as a tool to significantly grow your business. So it's kind of a little overview on the changing role of IT that I'm sure you're all seeing out there. Now just a little reality check is so that earlier on we brought up this fancy little pie chart here that said, you know, 60% of the maintenance and staff cost, the cost of running a server are maintenance and staff cost. And you know what? We've been in this space for a long time. We understand that a big part of many of your revenue has typically come from the maintenance part of this equation, which is that big blue piece right there. And for some of your clients, that revenue will continue always because they'll want to have an on-premises solution, and we completely get that. Other clients and prospects will want to talk about the cloud. And one of the things that I wanted to mention is that those MSPs that are embracing Cloud Nation and adding a CSP model to their business, what we're seeing is that clients are used to paying for services. And whether it be a server in the cloud or the service that's on premises, not all of that goes away. And what we're seeing is the ones that are really embracing this, they're finding more than enough service-related revenue to continue to fill that service bucket that they're looking for. But what they're doing is they're adding annuity-based revenue to what they're doing. In other words, what they're doing through Cloud Nation is they are selling services or solutions on a monthly basis of which they have the ability to set and control their own margins. Why a virtual desktop? Just very briefly, and I want to close this down here kind of shortly just because I want to make sure to leave time for Q&A, but you know what, we're seeing a huge movement here is customers are demanding access to apps from any data, any device, anytime. Employees are increasingly using their own devices. Virtual desktops allow companies to control their valuable company information. The company information lives in secure data centers, not on individual devices. And another thing that a virtual desktop does is it avoids what I'll call data silos. And I know before I changed to being a fully virtual desktop compliant person is that, you know, I would be, you know, out and about in a meeting and I'd have my laptop and I'd say, I got it, that data is on my desktop at home, or I'd be on my smartphone and I'd want to get information. I'd be in a meeting and I'd say, I can't get that. And the beautiful thing about a virtual desktop is regardless of the device, the same user experience is available and it's always on, any device, anytime, always on backup, and kind of bulletproof security. Speaking of security is, again, and I think I've mentioned this, is with a virtual desktop is the data never actually is delivered to the device. If the device is stolen or lost, the company data is safe. You know, Robert is just a big fan of what we're doing with driving the line of business applications through our application. And Robert, we kind of want to go through this briefly, but can you just touch on this because it's such a big issue for so many people?
Yeah, Tom. So a lot of resellers are bringing, you know, vertical applications. You know, it's kind of rare that you find your customers have only Office and maybe some other smaller applications, and there's no server that's actually delivering something that's unique to them. Financial services, legal, healthcare, construction, whatever. Marketing, all of these things typically will reside on that on-premise server, and they may include, some may include a SQL server, some may include a database. There might be an ACT database or a Sage Mass 90, a little bit more heavier version of QuickBooks, etc. These are all things that are there. You just can't move those to the cloud to just any platform like some kind of web services and stuff like that. So a lot of their data is going to be there. That's kind of, it's the anchor that's holding a lot of folks down. So what we've provided is this path to moving them to the cloud. You have to be able to manage the applications and the data in a way so that they deliver back to the customer in the same working environment they're used to having. So that's where a virtual desktop, or, you know, a hosted desktop coming from to them that looks and feels very much like what they've already been working with. So from the user experience, they don't miss anything. And they're able to really get that same experience with that line of business service that they already have.
Thanks.
So let me jump in here, Tom, on this one. So this is a guy, yeah, Bill Good Marketing. This is one of our clients out of Texas, and they make this thing called Gorilla, which is a software CRM package for financial services, and it's very popular amongst very high-end financial services organizations, Raymond James, Wells Fargo Advisors, ING, etc. And back, I guess 6-7 months ago, they're just kind of getting hammered because it was an on-premise solution. It's a piece of software, but it has to work inside an ecosystem. It needs Microsoft Office Pro. It has some storage that's connected to it. There's a lot of files that make up it, so it doesn't just live by itself. So it was a real good candidate for many of their customers to move their desktop into a cloud solution. So basically what we did was we spun up a virtual machine for them, provisioned their software on that machine. We gave local admin rights to their technology guys over at that company, which in this case, they act like an ISV/reseller. They loaded all their software, got it up and running and working just fine. And once they had that software running, we plugged it into our multi-tenancy environment, our Citrix deployment architecture, and now they are rolling this thing out to all of their customers, and they're converting their on-premise solutions over to a cloud-based solutions, and they're just going gangbusters. January was their biggest sales months ever of their software, and it's because of the cloud deployment of it. So you have a guy who actually just made this leap to the cloud. We provided a built-in billing system with it as well, so it was branded for them. Their portal is branded for them, and as you can see, all those mobile devices now connect to it. It's a really, really good opportunity that these folks took to market. Thanks, Tom.
Yeah, absolutely. So just a couple things, and we'll close this up, is that one of the questions we always get is, okay, with the Cloud Nation environment, how can we bill? And basically what we've set up is we've set up a multi-tier billing platform where, quite frankly, either we'll do all the billing, and for our members, we'll provide them with a check, if you will, on a monthly basis, or we've got other members that want to do all the billing themselves. We've got it set up so that they can absolutely do that. And then basically what we do is on a monthly basis, we charge them a wholesale price, and they charge their client basically the retail price. Just quickly, Cloud Nation, how does it work is that we're a member-based cloud services provider, and we work directly with the channel. We don't sell to any small or medium-sized businesses. Excuse me. As part of being a member is you get initial training, what we call our Cloud Essentials training, access to advanced level training and certification, complete access to our Cloud Solutions platform, complete access to the Cloud Nation community portal, and ongoing sales and marketing support. We really try to focus our webinars on what we say we're going to do, which is the TCO. So I would offer, if any of you out there are looking at your current MSP or VAR practice, or maybe you still have a kind of a break-fix practice, and you're saying, you know what, I want to get into the cloud, I want to understand it, I want to have an immediate solution, and I want to start making money off it right away, I would encourage you to reach out to us, and we can certainly have a conversation offline just about what our current MSPs and CSPs are doing and how you might be able to benefit from that. Here's just an image of our, basically what we do is when we start with a new member, before they're able to resell what we have, we require that they go through the Cloud Nation Certified Professional certification, and it's about 8 or 10 hours, but it really gives our members a good overall foundation of the cloud, how it works, how to do a pre-sale assessment, how to onboard people, how to do the sales marketing, those kind of things. You know, we're always asked, well, how do you make money on it? Here's just a quick example here is that, you know, this is if you had a client that had 10 employees, and we're saying here our virtual desktops, they start at I think like $39 a month retail. But by the time people add up their Microsoft Office Professional and throw in a line of business application and get a file share, you know, I would say our average that we're looking at right now is about $72 to $80 per month. So then you would have, if you had 10 times 80 is $800 per month. Annualized, it's $9,600. If you determined that you wanted to set your margin at 20%, basically what that means is one client with 10 employees is worth about $2,000 a year in revenue for you. this again, we're 100% channel focused. We let our members set their own prices and own their own clients. And it was designed, our whole portal is designed from the ground up to provide initial ongoing training and education to maximize your profits and to help our members grow their businesses. Becoming a members is, what we're right now looking for MSPs that actually have clients that they can point to, that they can say, you know what, I have 3 clients right now that I think would be really good candidates for this. And what I would say is that we typically have an initiation fee. However, if you are an existing MSP who got clients that you believe would benefit from this platform, give us a call, talk to us, because right now one of the things we're doing is we're saying if you successfully complete your CNCP or your Cloud Nation Certified Professional curriculum, we'll provide you with membership and access at no charge. Last thing, again, my name is Tom Poole, and right up there is my telephone number and my email. And I would say that I'll leave this up there so you can write that down. Don't worry about having to. We're going to send you this PowerPoint presentation, and also for those of you again that would like a copy of Robert's TCO DIALATRON, simply shoot him an email, and he'll make sure to send that DIALATRON out to you. Again, the only thing we ask is for feedback. Let us know what we can do to make it better. And then, having said that, it looks like it's about 10:48 here on the West Coast. And Heather, do we have any questions?
Yeah, we actually have a couple. Specifically, as it relates to the DIALATRON, are you able to access that in different currencies, or is it currently set in U.S. only? We have a gentleman asking if he can access it in euros.
That is a doggone good question. And
it's a great question.
We just put this together. So right now we just have it in American currency. But you know what I would offer is, for the individual that asked that question, why don't you hook up with Robert? And my guess is Robert's kind of the MacGyver, and so I'm sure he can put it together so it's fully compliant with your current currency. But thanks, that's a great question.
Yeah, that's super.
Okay, one of our next questions is, how many existing Cloud Nation members do you currently have?
We just launched on January 8th, and I would say that we've got, the response has been phenomenal. We've got between 400 and 500 people that have either gone to our webinar, downloaded a white paper, or are currently on our free trial. And we have just right now a handful of we have a handful of members, and then we've got a group that's right now going through their certification.
Hey, Tom, okay. Let me chime in on that one as well. I think that it might be a perspective question as well, that they're saying, hey, how many virtual desktops did you actually deploy as well? And we got many hundreds and hundreds of them already deployed. For example, the FDA happens to be one of our customers. MIT vetted our platform and selected us as their deployment platform for the virtual desktops. They actually went head-to-head with a number of other solutions. So if you get your techie hat on and you're asking that question as, does our technology solution vet out better than a VDI solution, then we'd be more than happy to have that conversation with you privately. But yeah, no, we've been at this thing for a little over 4 years and delivering hosted desktops internationally in all sorts of different environments. So I think just to clarify that for you, Tom's referring to the actual Cloud Nation certification in the portal and et cetera in those areas.
Thanks, Robert. Heather, more questions?
Yeah, we do have one question from a gentleman asking how the Cloud Nation Virtual Desktop accounts for mobile users that need data for offline use. The examples he gives being a tablet without wireless or a laptop on an airplane.
Yeah, that's a great question. One we get rather often. This is actually the great part of our architecture. This is We have a number of solutions that you as the individual can do yourself. Because we leverage the public cloud marketplace for storage, for your customer storage, and the availability and the redundancy of that is just unmatched. So we don't want to be in that particular game. So what you can do as the MSP is that we'll bring you 5 or 6 different types of technology for replication down to the endpoint devices. So heck, if you want to use box.com, you can. We're also a SPLOB provider for Citrix, so there's a product called ShareFile, which I personally think is fantastic. You just start using, much like Dropbox, you designate folders and it replicates down to the devices, and they support all endpoint devices, including Androids and iPads, etc. and stuff. So you get the option to use the solution that you feel comfortable and you feel comfortable working with. We're not dictating to you what the replication process or that offline use policy is going to be. So for example, if you don't feel comfortable just keeping your data in the Amazon facility and you want to replicate it over to Azure because they offer a free 9-month trial of 200 gig, you can do that. This is the beauty of what we bring. Cloud Nation is really the control and command layer over the top of this that enforces a multi-tenancy Active Directory structure, but how you go in and out and get that stuff, and that process is strictly up to you, and we're here to suggest, advise, and to support you in offering those solutions. We have out-of-the-box stuff, but we'd love to hear what you have to say about, hey, I tried this solution and this worked really well. And we put that into the ecosystem and that community that Tom's talking about, and then we share that with people.
Thanks, Robert. Heather?
We have one gentleman asking, just I guess for a repeat, he says, did you say that the product can be white labeled?
That's a great question. Yeah, absolutely. And in fact, we've designed it to be white labeled. And so essentially, well, here, if we have just a few minutes, maybe what I'll do is I'll just show our listeners today how it actually looks. How it's always nice to be able to see how things actually look in real time. And
yeah, so Tom, let me chime in. Well, you're going to do that. So. There's a good one right there. That's a Horizon Private Cloud. It's an interesting reseller that we have out there. You have branding that you have over the top of that. We have many resellers who use this branding for the billing engine, which you see right there. You are able to take this and completely white label it for yourself. In addition to that, you're able to brand a Citrix web interface or storefront specifically for you as a reseller. So what that means is when they go to log in from their desktop or access it from an iPad stuff, they're going to your branded portal. So the portal.yourname.com, and up comes all your logos, look and feel, and stuff like that. So all the communications that go out, all the billing information, et cetera, will show up as well as that too. So Tom, you want to go back to that Gorilla in the Cloud slide there, and I'll tell you what we did with those guys from a white labeling point of view. Right there. So this company required that not a single thing go out having to do with any kind of image or whatever it is that would be from the providers of the technology. So Gorilla has a completely branded front end where people log into, as well as all of the emails that come out for notifications of payments, etc., as well as the place where they provision and buy the Gorilla in the Cloud storage, apps, enable any other financial users to come on. It's all branded, 100%.
Thanks. Good question. Very good question. Yeah, we encourage you guys to build your own brand. What we many of our resellers want to have the credibility of something bigger than they individually are, and so what we do is we have a Powered by Cloud Nation that we let them use that basically is almost like an Intel inside, but it's Powered by Cloud Nation, where you can say, yes, we have geo-redundant data centers, and and time zones across the United States, and we use N+1 architecture, and we're ISO 9001 compliant and all those things. But at the end of the day, this is about you. It's not about us. It's about you and your clients, and we're there to let you white label and brand yourself and grow your own business. So, Heather, any other questions?
Yeah, I think we have time for about one more. One gentleman asked, do you integrate with ConnectWise, and this is kind of one of my questions too. Do you have any other integrations that you all work with?
Want to take that one, Robert?
Certainly. The answer is yes, and also when you integrate with ConnectWise or Autotask or some other PSA, it's a series of what does that actually mean, right? Is it for purposes of billing and recognizing of invoices, so you can take your recurring billing and drop it in there as a historic piece, or are you actually looking for integration for ticketing and generating work orders to actually start a process of ordering, like 10 new desktops, and you drop it into a 10 new desktop deployment structure inside ConnectWise. They have a project plan that you have, and you can say, hey, there's a project plan. It's right there. It's for deploying desktops, and has that whole list. We actually have that list, that actual step-by-step ConnectWise deployment model that out of the box you can load it into your ConnectWise, create that project plan, and whenever you get the order, it launches that ticket and that project ticket maybe on your service board to go run that one. Excuse me. So there is a big window there of what an integration into those two systems look like, and we are actively want to hear from the user base what those connection points would look like further past just straight accounts receivable, that type of thing.
Thanks. Heather, do we have time for one more?
Yeah, one moment. So our final question is, what is your normal initiation fee for this program?
Our normal initiation fee is $2,995, and what that gets you is gets you access to your Cloud Essentials training, advanced certification, ongoing training, which means we have webinars every single week for our members that we provide on business issues and on technology issues. It provides sales and marketing support, and it gives you access to your own white-labeled engine for you to sell cloud solutions. Again, from a standpoint of MSPs that are in business, have existing clients that they can point to that they think would be valuable to provide the Cloud Nation solution, give us a call and talk to us, because in some cases we'll waive that just because we want to bring in the best and the brightest, and we want to get a really good group of members as our foundational group. So I would say, once again, let me bounce to the end of this, and you'll see my email, and by all means reach out to me and let's have a conversation. It is right at the top of the hour, and we want to make sure to get you out of here on time and under budget. And so at the end of the day, I just thank you so much for joining us today. We appreciate it. We hope that today's webinar helped you to get your arms around that TCO conversation, which is sometimes difficult to have. If you have any other questions about that, if there's any way we can help you out, by all means, reach out to Robert at cloudnation.co or myself at tom@cloudnation.co. Stay tuned for subsequent webinars, because we're always looking to figure out what the focus du jour and what we need to be able to deliver to you. Two last things is, if you want that DIALATRON, email Robert, give us some feedback. And then the last thing is that we're doing these webinars every single week, and if there are things related to the cloud that maybe don't make sense or you'd like to learn more about, shoot me an email and let me know, because we're always looking for good quality subject matter that's valuable to you as MSPs. And so again, thank you so much. Heather, thank you for helping us out and facilitating this. Robert, thanks for joining us today. Everyone have a wonderful and safe day.